Hello everybody, my name is Daniil Dubov still, and this is my recap of game 5, where Jan played white and started the game with 1a4, to which Ding replied with his normal 1a5 followed by 0 Lopez. And yeah, Jan came to the game with this little idea in the 6d3 line, which is actually smart and subtle. And also Jan won a very nice game against Ding after a3, after d6, but opted for c3 this time. Castles, h3, bishop b7. Well, bishop b7 I didn't like initially, but I mean I have to admit still I'm not the biggest fan of the direction sets, but it's actually like engine's top choice. So bishop b7 was played, a4, knight a5, which is also normal. Bishop a2, c5, bishop g5. So this is the first interesting point of the game. Ding played h6, which is a very, very straightforward and decent move, by the way. Irina and I had an interesting discussion on this d6, d5 break that actually we had different opinions. So Irina actually liked it and I didn't. But now I checked it pretty well. I think it works. So I must admit she was right and I was wrong. Still, you need to be very smart as black to play. So first of all, the idea here is to play c4. Not on c4, but queen takes d1, rook takes d1, c4. And then after knight d2, black has some compensation, like this bishop is an offside and stuff. But actually, it's either you play something like h6, bishop e3, knight takes e4, takes, rook e1, and here I think exactly rook e8 followed by bishop b6, bishop c5, or you are quite a lot worse. So it's not really surprising that Jan was not worried about this d5. Okay, even if it works, you can only play it being very well prepared. And once again, it's not the line that you expect most as black. So it's not too surprising that Ding played h6, takes, knight b to d2. We were a little bit surprised on air by Jan's speed, and we saw that at some point his prep has probably stopped and he started to bluff a little. But actually I checked it afterwards, they kind of played well in the beginning, and Jan played all the best moves, which makes me think he actually knew them, as black was also playing in a very logical way, and those moves you could predict. So bishop d5, taking control on the square on d5, rook takes a1, takes, queen d7. So now it's very much about white knight making it to d5 or not. And yeah, first white needs a knight on e3 from where it could jump to both d5 and f5, so that's why rook e1 was played. Jan blitzed it out, rook e8, queen d1. Yeah, I think he has barely spent a minute for these 19 moves. And here Ding played bishop d8, which is the first inaccurate move. So basically black had 4 or even more decent options. So one of them was mentioned on air. It starts this ridiculous plan of rook a7, knight f1, bishop c8, followed by knight e7. And like this is how you chase the bishop away, avoiding the trade of bishops, which favors white normally. Maybe you start with g6 just not to allow knight g4, but in general the plan itself is very interesting, and also like though it is creative, you never play it over the board, is my impression. Another decent option was to go g6, which we mentioned too, knight f1, and then something like h5, knight e3, and king g7 or king h7, where once again, the engine is actually satisfied with black's position and says black is completely fine. But in general, black has to sit and wait still, and white can try fishing for some king h2, rook g1, g4 ideas, which actually look a bit ridiculous, but they seem to work in many lines. I checked it briefly. The position is probably equal indeed, but it's not that white is running out of ideas at all. So this was also normal. And the fun part is that actually, like we said so many times on air that trading the bishop's favors white, that I wanted to mention it that an idea was also a decent move. But the idea here is that you don't want to take on d5. Like, I mean, advocating our understanding, I will say that the point is that basically you want to bring this knight to e6, and then, yeah, after some knight f4, when white takes, I mean, it's a little bit of a different story as black knight is controlling the square on d5, and in many lines black will be in time to play d6, d5 himself. Anyway, those were some of the alternatives to Ding's bishop d8, which is a little bit strange, but I get the point. So basically he realizes bishop is bad and he wants to bring it to b6 after knight e7 followed by the trade. Knight f1 happened, knight e7, takes, knight e3, bishop b6 is a good move, h4. So this is why, where not having an engine, I started to really dislike black's position on air, which was a bit of a premature. White is pressing indeed, white is a bit better, but it's nowhere near being that dramatic that we saw on air. Ding played queen c6, which is normal. Rook a2 I think was also a decent move. h5, he played c4, which is a logical follow-up to this whole bishop d8, bishop b6 maneuver. Like now he's opening the diagonal for the bishop. Jan played d4, which is also reasonable. And yeah, Ding took. This is kind of normal, although rook d8 was also possible. And I want to praise my my colleague Irina, who actually was very good spotting this cool defensive idea. Like, it didn't look good to me. I thought queen g4 is coming and it's very hard to protect g7, but she came up with this brilliant move knight a8. And yeah, queen g4, queen e5 doesn't lead anywhere, so white has to take on d4 first. And then black is actually fine after queen e6 followed by queen f6, exactly as she mentioned. Playing d5 here, I think, is also possible. Black is more or less okay after both moves, so white has to try something like g3, and he keeps some pressure, although clearly, like in any of the lines, even if you're going to take on d4, in any of the lines, the inclusion of rook d8, g3 favors black, as this rook on d8 is quite a good piece. Ding took instead, which is not too bad either. Knight takes d4. And he played queen c5, which is the first really big mistake of the game. In fact, there is nothing wrong with playing something like queen b7. And white is clearly a little bit better, but there is no way for him to set dominance of any kind or to create some mating attack. Let's say after knight f5, black can just take on e3, knight takes e3, queen takes e4, queen takes d6, and knight c6. And this is the ancient line where, as white, it wants f3, queen e6, takes, knight g4. And then once again, the game continues. White is clearly better in an ending, but it's also clear that with a good defense, black will most probably hold it, which happens according to my analysis after king f7, knight e5, takes, and something like b4. And then black is not in time to win his pawn back, as after rook e2 there is always rook e4, but the pawn is not going to be enough for white to win the game. So queen b7 was normal. Bishop takes d4, that we discussed, was also kind of acceptable if black is not rushing with playing queen c5. Queen c5 is actually very, very good for white. White is probably winning here. But something normal like, I guess, rook h6 or some other move is basically securing black from, let's say, any immediate trouble. Rook a2 is the best move, and this is what we wanted. But what we missed was, I guess, this idea of rook e2 b4 followed by c takes before c3, which is a very, very important tactical nuance, and black is more or less okay. He's also okay after something like e5, d5, f4, queen e6, as we have actually suspected on air. So yeah, those were the alternatives. Ding played queen c5. Jan replied with queen g4, which is the most natural move in my opinion, but queen f3 was a little bit better, which is not that simple to explain, but like one of the really important factors is that in the line of queen g5, or basically whenever black queen goes somewhere, there is this nuance e5, very important tactical idea, attacking the rook. And yeah, in most of the lines, things go well for white, although he has to be really precise. For instance, after rook d8, e6, rook f8, it's quite important to come up with this brilliant move rook a1. And the point is that after f takes e6, there is this cute tactical idea. And after bishop takes d4, black is in time with this intermediate check, and black cannot capture back because of rook a check, winning the rook. So queen f3 was a better move. Queen g4 is one much natural, and I would not really criticize Jan for playing it. Is yeah, once again, like normally natural moves are good. Queen e5. Speaking of natural moves, like of all the options, queen c5 is the least natural to me, right? You're blocking the bishop, so this is one more argument for my theory. Anyway, queen e5, knight f3 happened. Knight f3 was Jan's idea. Ding played queen e6. Queen f6 was actually also a decent move, but here to play queen f6 you actually need to calculate this move queen d7. Not the only option for white, but one of them. And here after bishop takes e3, rook takes e3, rook a1 check. So king h2 is not brilliant, as both rook f1 and g5, which we wanted on air, work. So rook e1 is the move. And this position we evaluated as slightly better for white, which is actually correct. But it's very likely that if black will play like an engine, he will hold some meaning like this. That still looks a little bit unpleasant to me, to be honest. But objectively, black is not even close to the line. All right, so queen f6 was also possible. Ding played queen e6, knight f5, takes. And he played queen f6, which is a very natural move, yet a mistake. And queen d7 was absolutely necessary, more or less. Although I can't quite understand what he didn't like. Speaking first of all of the move queen f4, which creates this threat of playing f5, f6. And here black has two decent options. One of them is queen d8, which is probably like worse than bishop d8, but this one, I guess, you can actually plan from far away. You're preventing f6, and then you're going to play d5. And white has some ideas there, something like rook d1, let's say d5, queen e5 or something, but in general, you can see that black managed to push his pawn, and he will most probably get even d4 at some point, and despite being pawned down in most of the lines, he will be just okay. But the move engine wants is bishop d8, which basically means you are good enough to calculate queen e4, d5, queen a8 check, takes, king h7, and you realize from far away that you're basically okay as black. First of all, black is very lucky that after something like knight e5, rook a1 check is a must, king h2, So basically, it's not only rook takes d that is the threat, but also knight g6. Just in terms of ideas, it wins very often. But black is in time with his bishop c7, pinning the knight, and trading it is the very next move, holding the game. So it's kind of likely that white will play g3 here, and then the direct line after rook a1 check, king g2, bishop f6. Once again, you cannot play something like bishop c7 or bishop b6 or like any other move because of knight h4 followed by knight g6. So you go bishop f6, rook b8, rook b1, rook a5 is actually bad, but rook b1 works. Rook takes b5, bishop takes c3, and black will probably hold this. Still, those lines are not that easy to calculate. So you can understand Ding who simply played queen f6. But the problem with queen f6 is that actually white manages to set this complete domination on the light squares, and black has to sit and wait. I guess Ding's point was that, well, I'll play rook b8, I'll play bishop c5. My whole stuff is basically protected, all pawns are protected, and I'll sit and wait, and it's kind of likely that white will not find a way to make progress. But yeah, it seems that those ways exist. Jan started with this really good move rook e2. The point being that after something else, black has this b4, and after c takes b4, queen takes b2 exist. So he simply wanted to provoke bishop c5 first. Yes, he actually realized, and this is very, very deep by Jan, that the bishop belongs to f6. And it's kind of harder to get to f6 from c5 than from b6. Like, it looks brilliant on c5, it is protected by a pawn. Now the pawn on b5 is protected too, but Jan judged very nicely that actually this bishop is kind of paralyzed and cannot help much. So Jan played g4, which is first of all a luft, and secondly, potentially it creates some mating threats that actually worked eventually. Queen d8 happened, queen d5, king f8. From now on, white had better options, but in general I kind of like what Jan was doing. He played king f1 here. White basically has two ways of playing this position. One of them is computerish, which is king h2. The main point being that after something like queen c7 or d7, you go knight h4. And then after queen b7, you don't trade queens, but you go queen d1. And then you play f6 next move, forcing some kind of reaction. And some position like this is actually winning for white, which is quite an unusual way of playing this, having this brilliant queen on d5. You don't want this queen d1, like even as one of the candidate moves. The second option was to play king g2 simply, and then after, let's say this, white can simply play knight h4, queen b7, takes, and f6. G takes knight f5, which leads to a very, very bad ending for black that, to be honest, I'm not sure. Like, my impression for the moment is that black is barely surviving this, but I think with the best play, playing all the 20 study-like moves, he will probably survive. Clearly, this has nothing to do with the practical game where black is just in trouble, and normally he will lose it in like 3 to 5 moves. And the third way is actually a very creative idea that Jan decided to rely on. He played king f1, after which Ding played rook c8 and the game ended quickly. But the best move was still something like queen d7, making sure there is queen takes g4 after f6. And then, like, if white will do the same, then black, I guess, gets quite a decent version of an ending compared to the previous one. So the engine wants f6, g takes, and I have a feeling that Jan's idea here was actually knight h4. queen takes g4, knight f5, queen takes h5, rook e7, which we saw on air, and it did look threatening. The checks don't lead anywhere, and black is kind of paralyzed, it felt. But it seems that after b4, he is just completely fine. Basically, b takes c3 is a threat, following it up by some rook b1 check or something, so white more or less has to take, after which there is queen h3 check, and yeah, king g1, queen g4 is a perpetual, and whenever you go to e-file, king e1, let's say, takes, you end up being on the light square, and then queen d3 secures the position for black. Moreover, there is this move rook b5 here that is probably very good for black. So queen d7 was the best chance. I'm actually curious on Jan's plans here. Not really sure what he was up to. It could be queen e4 too, which is also a good move, preparing queen h7, and this is objectively the best move, I guess. And then once again, white is better, but compared to the position he had 3 or 4 moves ago, black has actually improved. So this was the best chance. Dink played rook c8 instead, basically saying, you know what, I'll keep waiting and try to show me what your idea is. To which Jan replied brilliantly with rook e4. And yeah, after that, I guess white is winning, mostly thanks to this very, very nice idea that happened in the game, rook b8, and Jan played g5. Very good move. Actually, king g2 is winning too, like white does not need to rush, but g5 is just straight winning. As well, first of all, h takes happened in the game, rook g4, and Dink realized that there is no f6 because of this brilliant motif knight h4. You cannot really allow knight g6 check, so you got to take. White plays h6. Very, very nice tactics there by Jan. And basically, black does not have a satisfying move. Like, you cannot allow h takes g7, you cannot allow rook takes g7, you cannot take either, as this is made. Yeah, and if you go g5, then this unlucky en passant rule is your problem. So this is basically winning in the game. Dink played yeah, in the game Dink played rook a8, knight takes g5, rook a1 check, king e2, king g2 was just as good, queen e7 check, knight e4. We were wondering on air why didn't Jan play king f3, and I guess bishop takes f2 was a problem, which to be honest we blundered completely, but black is that paralyzed that even here white is winning actually after king takes f2. Knight e4 is clearly a much more safe approach. White basically stabilized again, and he's ready to play f6, g takes h6, winning the game. Dink played queen e8, king f3, preparing this f6 idea, queen a8. Yeah, it's very unlucky for black that like, it's not only that he lost, he's lost, he cannot even attack anything. Like, let's say you go rook f1. Well, f6 is winning, everything is winning, but also even if it's black to move, let's say you take, and white plays king g3, like, it's not at all the end of the world for white, and you will face the same problem with f6 coming eventually. So Dink played rook a8, takes, f6, another very good move. G6 happened. Well, g takes is not a fairy tale at all. Like, as we discussed, knight takes c5 is possible, but just knight takes f6, setting the complete dominance is good enough. So g6 takes, rook rook a2. The problem with king f7 was that there is, I mean, there are many problems, but this is one of them. Just following it up with some f4, f5, or rook e7 check or whatever white wants. So rook a2 was played by Dink, at least trying to create some counterplay that is only 6 to 7 moves late. Knight g5, rook takes b2. No, wait, this did not happen. Like, why our team is tricking me? So king g4 was played by Jan. Rook takes b2, rook h6. And this is where Dink resigned. Which makes sense, as after bishop takes f2, there is rook h8 check, king f7, king f5. And this is actually a very, very cute position, as black cannot really stop mate in 1 with either knight takes d6 or knight g5 checkmate. So overall, this was a very, very good game by Jan. And like I would say, of all the decisive games for the moment, this one was by far the best. As Dink played reasonably to some extent. It was not his best game for sure, but actually this was not his like worst game either, I would say. And he was holding on more or less decently. And the like really critical moment of the game, once again, was him playing here queen f6, not queen d7, which is easier for me to explain, to be honest, than some of his mistakes in game 2. Anyway, we keep having a very, very interesting match, and come join us tomorrow to watch what happens next. Dink will have white.